All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to I don't even know what we'd call this. It is part of the podcast, maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
Definitely part of the podcast.
Yeah. So welcome to the Hacking Open Source Business podcast. This super live breaking news event. I should have like breaking news scroll across the screen or something. I don't know how breaking it is because it's been like a week. But, we wanted to get together and talk a little bit about some of the news of the last couple of weeks. And specifically some things that impact open source. And I think the big one to start with is all about GitHub and Copilot.
Copilot's been a hot topic ever since it was released, but now some movement has finally happened in this direction.
Yes. So if you are under a rock or haven't been following, the news, GitHub has been sued over Copilot, because Copilot is using, GitHub repositories to do some AI and help you write code and make, suggestions on how you should write code in your software. And part of that is challenging because a lot of code on GitHub has licensing that doesn't necessarily allow that.
Right. And a lot of code has licensing that requires attribution that is very difficult to do when your trusty Copilot is just spitting out code for you.
Well, and so this is an interesting question, right? So when we talk about like something like Copilot, and I am not an expert on Copilot, and I have looked at it, but I don't know all the ins and outs. I don't know where you are on this, Avi. But from an open source perspective, obviously, if you're, let's say, GPL software, you can modify the code as long as you release it as GPL, right? Apache license is a little more liberal. MIT license is a little more liberal. But things like BSL license are more strict. AGPL might be a little more strict. It is a little more strict. So, I mean, there's different licenses that could impact this differently. But the question is, when you talk about code snippets, when you talk about like a dozen lines of code or a method for, doing something that's very common, maybe like checking credentials against an SSO system, people don't always think about that code snippet as being licensed. They think about it as, I'm not using the full product, even if they copy the code. So how many people are actually copying code from other repositories, just like a snippet, like, oh, I really love how they did this, and then just cut paste into their own code?
Well, I mean, we do this all the time with Stack Overflow, I guess. Like you look up, I need help with X, and then someone shares a code snippet and there's no license for it. So if you can't do that with Copilot, it seems like just grabbing a snippet off of Stack Overflow should also be illegal, but it's not.
Well, but with Stack Overflow, it would be interesting. I would imagine that a lot of those code snippets are from code that do have licenses. The people
right,
who are
and
posting...
not attributed or anything. But maybe
right.
Stack Overflow's terms of service probably specify something about the code that's pasted into answers as being implicitly licensed. I have no idea.
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I would guess not, because that's not something that you would generally think about, right? I'm Googling. I'm just going to the search.
Yeah, bring it up. Yeah,
because I don't know.
Because it would be crazy. I mean, no one would ever put code on Stack Overflow and then get upset when people use that snippet, or do something if they use the snippet. But technically, you might be able to. I don't know. We are not lawyers. If anyone,
but we do know lawyers.
We do.
I just did like 12 podcasts with lawyers at All Things Open.
I pay them a lot of money.
I should be able to call said lawyers and maybe get them on like this. That could be interesting. But
a future episode of this will indeed have some lawyers coming soon, so stay tuned for that.
There is some call outs about this, but it looks like it just kind of puts the onus on you.
Sorry, who is you in this?
Oh, sorry. From a Stack Overflow perspective, it looks like it puts the onus on those who are posting,
Okay.
right? In terms of content. Um,
This
yeah,
is I think, and this gets into similar grounds as like
yeah.
like even like the Oracle Java or sorry the Oracle Google thing around Java, where like it's not, when you're talking about incomplete APIs or incomplete snippets of something larger, or like how these things fit together. Licensing is hard. I don't understand a lot of it.
Well, but the problem is this licensing? I mean, yes, it has a licensing component, but you're talking about something that is creating code. Like, think about how many people make NFTs, right? And think about the other AI type of systems that are out there that are either building like art or building even like suggested taglines for blogs or whatever. It's going out there crawling the internet and it's pulling down everything regardless of the license, and then it's using that to feed it in, and it's spitting something out.
Which is apparently fair use of these things, but is it? I mean, if you suppose you had a model that was spitting out verbatim copies of data it was trained on, that's obviously bad. And if you had a model that was spitting out always unique things, with respect to what it was trained on, that seems obviously fine, and we're somewhere in the middle.
I'm curious what the users who watch this think. So put some stuff in the comments, and be happy to have a discussion. And this is where if we go live at some point, having live users to banter back and forth, what might be worthwhile. But this is a murky topic because.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. Like, so I'm 100% positive that if you were to use Copilot extensively or any AI tool extensively that uses GitHub or open source repositories as a source, that you will find that there is a large portion of the code base that you could find in other people's code base.
Right. Definitely.
Snippets and everything. I don't know what that percentage is. Okay.
I bet it's a lot.
I bet it is.
Like, so much of code is just plumbing. It's like, it's not interesting. It's just
but
plumbing.
That's the thing, right? Is so there might be only so many ways to do something. And so it's, it becomes challenging. And again, from a legal perspective, this is an interesting question that we should ask some of our lawyer friends. Is with this, how much needs to change before it's different. So there's a documentary on what is that? What is it? It's Lulu. What is is it Lulu Mom? Lulu Mom? The apparel company.
Oh, Lululemon.
Lululemon. Yes. Okay. So was that the company that had like the place that people could basically become a distributor, and then they would send them all. Was that?
Oh, I have no idea.
Hold on a second. Now I gotta Google this. Anyways, there's been a couple documentaries on this. Yes, it was Lululemon, which is, I think it's Lulu Rich is the documentary, where they were talking about how big of an industry this got, and because they needed to do more prints, more examples, the designers were taught to go out to like Google, find patterns, find designs, and all they had to do is change 10% in order to get around the copyrights. So what they would do is they would get a pattern or a print that had like an animal or something, and the animal had like brown eyes, and they would change it to blue, and then they would like add a little fur on the top, and it'd be like, it's new, we're done. And they would be producing just tons and tons of things. It's Lulu. Yeah. So the documentary is Lulu Rich. which is the rapid rise of LuLaRoe, a multi-million-dollar, multi-level marketing company. So not Lululemon. So
Got it. Okay. That makes
Just to
more
be fair.
sense. I would have been surprised to hear this.
yes, yeah. So if you haven't seen that documentary, it is interesting. But my point being, there is there a certain point where you could take someone's code and change it just enough where it becomes an original work, and I'm sure that there's some legal basis for what that percentage is.
I would assume so too. We really got to get a lawyer on the podcast.
But is it morally right to do so?
I mean, you could make the argument that like most creation is in some sense probably some degree of this.
Yes, yeah. No, I think you're right. But it is an interesting case, and I'm sure that it will wind its way through the legal side for years.
Yeah, this will take a long time, and I think the more that I mean, this is not even specific to code. This is like an AI problem in general. I think because it really automates a lot of the aspects of creation that we are so thinking so deeply about and trying to make sense of regulating as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm interested in the take of the audience, those who are watching, listening. What's your take on this from an AI perspective? Should you be able to use and mine open source software to develop code? My suggestion would be that, any AI should be license aware. And so it should automatically have the default to say, I'm going to produce GPL code or Apache code and only select from those repositories that match that license.
That seems really, really hard to do.
Yeah, but it's someone else's problem to make it work. So.
Oh, totally. I just
That's what
right.
I'm gonna be
yeah,
like. Let someone else figure it out.
Yeah, because I there's like a hierarchy. You can make a hierarchy of licenses as well, because some play nicely together, others don't play nicely together, and well, there's a $1 billion idea for someone. Go nuts.
Indeed. So, changing topics now.
Yeah.
Now, the other big thing that we have seen the last few weeks is obviously massive cuts and layoffs in the open source ecosystem, as well as the overall tech industry. There's been quite a few companies that have been laying people off. I think the ball has been rolling since, for a year now, but I think it's really kind of picked up in the last couple of months. And Twitter's gotten a lot of press on this, obviously, with the takeover from Elon, and Meta also. So if you haven't heard, 3,700 people sliced from Twitter and 11,000 from Meta.
Yeah, and I think, there's been, rumors that that Amazon might be following. I think they already had a hiring freeze in some spots, if I remember correctly. Oh, I should verify that before we start disseminating incorrect information. But yeah, this seems to be just hitting big tech in a lot of different spots, and so we may actually see tech salaries go down.
Oh my God. What will the tech folks do? Let's be honest. We have had a very difficult time in the industry hiring people because there's been an insatiable demand for talent. And people are willing to overpay for people who have minimal skill sets, or even like just starting out, because there is a high demand for, folks. And this really kind of came to a head a couple of years ago coming out of the pandemic. But that slowed down a bit. Now we've got a lot of really good people hitting the market now. And I think that's going to have a weird impact, a positive impact on those who are looking for good talent. And it could boost a lot of companies, but it also potentially signals a change from an economy perspective where maybe and we've talked about this before, the shift from the growth at all costs to profitability
Yep.
is really starting to take hold, right? So we have to be mindful of what we're spending now more than ever.
Yeah, and if we see more companies focus more on profitability, I'll be curious what that does to corporate involvement with open source, which is, typically sometimes a little bit murky to measure the ROI of that.
Yes. How do you prove that if you are contributing to open source projects that it is providing an ROI to the company? That's a really good point, and it is a very difficult proposition, right?
Right. But on the flip side, we now have a lot more software developers that don't have a day job and maybe have some spare cycles to do some open source while they're looking for their next thing.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that from a perspective, the funny thing is, like, I know people who are impacted by these layoffs, and they're really good. It's
Yeah.
not like
Oh, of course.
and so I
mean,
think that there's an opportunity for a lot of startups who are looking for someone to come in at a senior level and be able to make a big impact. I think this is an opportunity for some of those
yeah, it's going to
folks
be
to
very
jump in.
good time for startups looking to hire some very top tier talent. The
But
market is full of it.
But on the same token, as we start to move forward, if this starts to accelerate, this could cause some cascading impacts. I saw some people, posting on Twitter and other social channels that, this is very similar to the recession and, the whole, web 1.0 days where we had the bubble burst. I lived through that, so I'm an old dude now. I feel so old. In my mid 40s, but I still lived through that, and it was a scary time, honestly, because you never knew what was going to happen. And I think the bad thing is there's good ways. Well, there's never a good way to lay off or have this happen, but there are better ways to handle it than others. Okay, and I know, like Twitter, people just showed up, and it was like, I can't get on, and they're like, there you go.
Yeah.
And I don't know what sort of packages they got or whatnot. I think Meta said that they're going to give like 16 weeks to everybody, and then 2 weeks for every week or a year that they've been there.
Oh, I thought that I saw something that there was like 6 months that they were giving to people. Yeah. Now let's not wonder about
Zuckerberg
facts.
said losing their jobs will receive 16 weeks of pay plus two
okay.
additional weeks for every year of service.
Okay.
Oh, and
Maybe
they'll get health coverage for 6 months.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I saw.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
But I can tell you, I worked at a consulting company way back during the bubble burst, the first bubble burst. And I was at a client site, and everybody in the company got an email, okay? And the email basically said, arriving at your home today is going to be a FedEx. And in that FedEx, it will outline your new salary, your new pay package, or your severance package. Let us know if you have any questions.
Wow.
That was how they handled it. Seriously. And I remember calling my wife and saying, did we get a FedEx package? And she goes, yeah, this is an envelope arrived for you. I go, can you open it? You see, I'm at work, I don't have the access to this. And she's like, well, what is it? And I'm like, it tells me if I still have a job or not.
Oh God.
Right? I mean, in horrible way. And I mean, obviously, if you do survive that, I can tell you my mentality shifted completely in that I don't want to work for that company anymore.
Yeah.
Even though I was okay, I didn't lose my job. I don't want to work for that company anymore. And so I looked for another job. And I'm sure that people at, Twitter, for instance, are doing that as well. Because let's be honest, if you went through that experience where you just logged in and your logins don't work, that's a horrible experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And people don't want to work for people who do that.
Yeah, most companies are going to deal with tough times at some point in their trajectory, but I think, it's just about how you handle that and how you, support your employees that counts at the end of the day. So if you are someone who is listening and impacted by these layoffs, our heart goes out to you. We hope that, we hope you find that next thing quickly and swiftly. And yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on what continues to happen with this trend. It's really tough to see, though.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I'm happy to help personally. I have an okay network in some companies. My network isn't as big as others, but if there's somebody out there who is listening, watching, looking for something, let me know. I might have something. I just, had someone reach out to me who's a designer and, knew someone who was hiring one. So happy to make those connections where I can. But hang in there. I know this is a rough time, but it is something that, we can all get through.
Absolutely.
But I do think this is an interesting time if you do have some opportunities to maybe like hone your skills and think about what you want to do. And, if you do get involved in some of these open source projects, a lot of these are entryways to get into, these companies, especially if you're contributing something that is worthwhile. And it gives you an in for a lot of companies because it's hard in a lot of cases to find that next gig. I know some people that I've worked with, some people that I've hired, they've talked to hundreds of people before they got an offer. So be mindful that it will work. It just might take time.
Yeah. But I think it's very true that contributing to open source projects can be, it's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to build connections in the open source community and space with other developers, and it can lead to jobs. Not that it is a silver bullet for that by any means, but it's definitely something to consider depending on what, your particular situation might be. So maybe, there will be some semblance of a silver lining to this.
So with these layoffs, okay, we see a shift in people who, let's be honest, are anti-Twitter now. So there's been talk of Mastodon. So have you looked at Mastodon at all?
I've used Mastodon a little bit. I mean, I made an account for it like many years ago now and checked it out, and then that was about it. It's interesting. I have mixed opinions about it. I'm curious what you think.
It's different. It's different, so it scares people.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't give you the same experience as Twitter. So part of the challenge for people who are shifting technologies or moving to something new is their expectations have been honed over years of use. Mm-hmm. And when they use something new that doesn't replicate the experience or doesn't improve it, they get fidgety really quick. And so there has been a flock of people moving to Mastodon. I think that the flock of people will eventually move back, except for those who are really hardcore on the privacy and the open source or the technical side, who can get around some of the limitations and the idiosyncrasies of Mastodon.
Yeah, the one thing that I don't quite understand about it, and maybe you do, since there's different servers of Mastodon, like you can go sign up in different places. Can these different servers interact with each other? I didn't actually quite get that.
I don't think so. Again, I'm not a Mastodon expert. It's something that we should probably look deeper into because honestly, from a company perspective or from a hacking open source business perspective, if we want to grow our social following, we want to be where more open source people are. But I think you actually have to connect and make connections with other people in the ecosystem so you can be part of their servers and their kind of locales. So you have to make those connections.
That seems to me like a fundamental limitation to it, I guess. Because like the whole thing with, if you're trying to be a Twitter replacement, you want to be the town square, as they like to position it. This fundamentally limits the world that you are interacting with.
Yeah. And again, it's something that I don't want to give too much advice on yet. It's just an interesting trend.
Yeah. I personally am just trying to understand it better because it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's actually a whole GitHub thing on it that I just found when I searched.
Yeah. But, it's interesting because I feel while Twitter itself is not an open source platform, Twitter has a very, very active, open source footprint. I'm trying to think of like the projects, but like Finagle came from Twitter. You know, the Scala web framework. I mean, there's a lot of open source that Twitter has done, and a lot of really big figures in the open source community worked at Twitter at one point in their careers, and so
absolutely,
yeah.
But no, I mean, so that exodus is going to be interesting. We'll have to pay attention to that, see what happens, and do a little bit of check into Mastodon. Interested for those who are out there in the Mastodon space. I know a couple of folks who have already kind of moved over there and been trying it out. I should probably ask them.
Yeah, listeners, tell us what you think.
Absolutely.
Maybe we should just go make a Mastodon account for the podcast and see what happens. What server do we pick?
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Confusing, but we'll figure it out.
We will figure it out.
All right. So, Avi, anything else in the open source week that was?
I don't know. I think we might have covered the main things that we had. I guess one other thing that was interesting that happened was that of the venture-backed company that builds this new web framework, Remix, was acquired by Shopify, which is really interesting. If I'm remembering correctly, they raised, I think, about $3 million. It was led by OSS Capital, JJ, who has been on the podcast. And I think after a pretty quick run, acquired by Shopify to continue building out the platform, which I think is really cool. That would be a good group to get on the podcast at some point too. So I'm very curious to hear about like how that all went down. But it's really cool to see businesses investing in open source in that kind of way. Like that must have been a pretty large investment to acquire that company.
Indeed.
So I'll be keen to see where the Remix platform goes from here. How
I think we're going to see a lot more consolidation.
Yeah.
In the next year.
I mean, this is what happens in recessions, right? Or just any kind of downturn is that things are going to get cheaper, and when things get cheaper,
people are going to be looking to pick up IP. Build their portfolios.
Yeah. Venture investment cools off, acquisitions go up. I think is what we may see. So, yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate all you listening to us banter on about all of the topics that were of the week. Go ahead, feel free to like, subscribe, follow, respond, tell us what you're interested in.
Don't just feel free, feel compelled, feel pressured.
Feel pressured. Okay.
Please like and subscribe.
Please. I am going to compel you. The power of the Yonk compels you to like and subscribe to us. Yes, we would appreciate that. And we hope that you'll listen to a couple of the other episodes. Go out there, find us on all the socials, and follow us. Until next time, we'll talk to you later. All right, we're good.